I just want to make pizza. Hi, so this is my first post on Reddit. Although I've been a long-time lurker. This happened to me 8 years ago when I was 17. I'd just come into a situation where I was still at high school age, but had to drop out and work full-time at a pizza spot across the street from the school I had attended. I had bills and rent and things to pay for. When I began working there, I realized a girl I had attended school with, she was a senior when I was a freshman, was my manager. Her name was Meredith, and she seemed slightly off-kilter, but I was, at the time, the sort of person to ignore personality flaws, mental instability, and my coworkers, partially because I enjoyed my job, and partially because I wanted to be friends with everyone. Don't ask me why. I can't for the life of me explain it now. Anyway, this girl Meredith was the manager during the day, and scheduled me to work under her quite frequently. We enjoyed working together. We would crack jokes, take smoke breaks together. I could sort of tell when I first started working there that she was a little crazy, but I didn't think too much of it because she didn't have a problem with me. Meredith had a boyfriend named Steve. He would frequent the pizza shop to visit her and get free shit. He looked sort of like Steve Buscemi if he were 19, and a stoner. You remember those stoners that wore dumb fucking mushroom glass necklaces? That was Steve. Sorry to anyone who wore those. He was pretty weird. He didn't seem to shower, and he has major mouth breather. I personally did not enjoy Steve's presence in the pizza shop. He creeped me out and seemed to stare at me blatantly when he would come in during my shift. One day, I come to work and guess who's in the kitchen, washing dishes? Our old buddy Steve. Meredith apparently had to spend even more time with Steve. His countless hours here during our shifts just weren't enough. I was slightly perturbed by this, but kept to myself the rest of my shift, and a while later requested that I be moved to the night shift, so I didn't have to endure near constant PDA or intense fighting. This is when my trouble began. Once I had switched to the night shift, Meredith seemed to have completely shifted her attitude towards me. I chalked it up to her being upset because we had such great times on our shifts. We were pals. I would call her to chill, and she would be incredibly rude and passive-aggressive, so I just stopped initiating any kind of contact. So, some backstory. My dad had a very tumultuous life. He was schizophrenic and bipolar, tried his hardest to be a good dude. He had won a lawsuit against a company he worked for being injured on the job, and had sort of rescued me from a shitty situation I had already got myself into. We were living together in a 2-story home, about 5 blocks from the place I was working. He was in and out of the house, hardly ever there. We had a Cadillac CTS that he purchased from a police auction with his lawsuit money. He was proud as fuck of that thing. I was too. I was unlicensed, but he let me drive anyway. So I would drive it the super far 5 blocks to and from work. I'm silly, I know. One night after work, I'm hanging out with some friends, and I got a really strange call. It was an unknown number, and as mentioned previously, I was extremely naive about people, so obviously I answer. All I can hear after I say hello is some creepy-ass heavy breathing. I'm sort of freaked out, so I say hello again. But I'm met with more heavy I hang up and tell my group of friends, and they tell me someone is probably just pranking me. A few hours go by, and in the meantime, I get more calls. Nothing but breathing. I'm beginning to get a little scared, but my friends believe I'm just being pranked, and tell me just to ignore the calls. I heed their advice and ignore the calls, all while being very confused and starting to become slightly afraid. We eat a shitload of munchies and pass out. The next day rolls around, and everything seems well and fine, and well until about 10 p.m. The private number is calling me again. I think to myself, I'll just pick up and tell them to stop, and I'm sure they will. I pick up and laugh. Please stop. Who is this? There's silence for a few seconds, and then a deep guttural voice saying, I will fucking kill you, bitch. Click. I feel my face go white and my palms get clammy. This isn't someone who is just fucking with me, because that isn't funny. This appears to be someone who is genuinely does not like me. Someone who may want to do me harm. I call a friend and ask her to come over, because I'm sort of afraid to be alone at this point. And who the hell knows where my dad is right now. I began to get a little paranoid at this point. I would make sure the first floor windows and doors were locked while I was there by myself. I started putting my phone on mute so I wouldn't know when whoever this was would be calling me. I stopped answering the calls. They slowed, and I was lulled into a false sense of security. A week later, I went to kick back with my girls. I didn't take the car as I usually had, because I was dealing with a lot of bullshit. I wanted to get completely obliterated drunk. A friend came and picked me up, and I thought nothing of the crazy person who wanted to kill me. My dad had come home that day, and would be there to watch and make sure no one tried to mess with the house or anything. I thought, I'm at least 4 drinks in when I get a call. This time for my dad. He's screaming as loud as he possibly can to, get the fuck home. I tell my friend that we have to bounce. She's totally cool with taking me back to the house. We arrive in probably about 10 minutes, because we generally only hung out in the southern area of our town. We pulled up and my dad is fucking furious. I can tell because when he would get extremely angry or into a manic state, he would pace back and forth, and he was doing this across the parking lot yelling at no one. I first thought that he had gone into one of his episodes, so I try my best to be prepared for that. I walk up. He yelps, look at the car, and points. I look at the windshield of our precious baby, and on it, in fucking spray paint nonetheless, is written, I know where you live, you little slut, and a drawing of a dick. Yes, I shit you not, a dick. I'm confused as hell now, and I have no clue who would want to fuck with me so much. I was not the type to do anything really shitty to anyone. I wanted to be everyone's friend. I racked up my brain trying to determine how I slighted anyone I had recently come in contact with and came up with nothing. Another week goes by. I haven't gotten any calls from private numbers. No more of my personal property gets damaged. I legitimately think it's over. I go to another party for my friend's birthday. This party is on a large piece of land in the middle of goddamn nowhere. There were probably about 150 people there. Tons of cars, lots of commotion. We had to park in a scary driveway that was about 1/4 of a mile from the house and walk the rest of the way because there was nowhere close. We go in, chill for a bit, and decide to go back out to the car to grab some blunts we had left behind. Lori and I are walking to the car when we realize one of the windows has been broken. We are sufficiently creeped out, so we walk very slowly up to it. There's no one around, and we had only been in for about an hour at this point. We go through the car to assess the damage and see what's been stolen. Some bud, a bottle we were drinking out of that was probably still very full. Her purse was gone, my purse was gone. We got super pissed. We did something dumb and started walking into the woods nearest us to try and recover some of the things we lost. We were using our cell phone flashlights, wandering through these woods when I get a call. I'm pretty focused on finding my shit, so I ignore it. I find my purse completely empty. We find Laura's wallet completely empty. I get another call. I ignore it. I'm too pissed because I just lost so much. By the time we'd walked back up to the party, This private caller had rung me at least 12 times. That's 12 times within a 5-minute period. Finally, when we get back up to the house, they call me again, and I scream into it, "Who the fuck is this? What do you want?" I scream just as I answer, and don't really take the time to listen to what's happening. And when I do, it's sort of terrifying. Whoever this is has been calling me and screaming as loud as they possibly can, probably throughout hanging up and calling again. All of it is unintelligible. When I stop screaming, "Who is this?" I can hear a literal banshee communicating with me on the other end. Up until this point, I couldn't determine who this was, but now I was certain. This was my old manager, Meredith. I hung up and threw my phone. I threw that bitch as hard as I possibly could. This was a pretty bad idea, as I was in sort of a bad situation at the time. In the middle of nowhere, wooded area, a sea of people, car broken into, broke my phone. I started crying and told Lori what was going on. She agreed that we needed to get the fuck out of there as soon as possible. I was hesitant to go into work the next day, but I did anyway, because I needed a new phone and just cash in general. I walk in with my head down, hoping none of my coworkers are aware of the extremely odd situation I've been thrown into. Weird enough, Steve was working. I distanced myself from him the whole night because I was scared that he too hated me. I had no idea why he was working this shift. Was it only to taunt me and intimidate me out of my own workplace? I began to realize that he too seemed to want to keep distance. Before the end of my shift, my night manager, who was also the general manager, Joe, asked if he could talk to me outside. I was confident of my position there. I didn't have issues with anyone else, and I had no idea why only one staff member had an issue with me. We stepped outside and I braced myself for bad news. I figured since Meredith was a manager and didn't like me, I'd be fired if she suggested it, even if I had no idea what I'd done. Joe informed me that Meredith came into the shop the previous night and was hysterical. She was looking for me. She was screaming and seemed to be on drugs. His words, not mine. She apparently had been flipping out because she thought I had been sleeping with stoner Steve Buscemi behind distance. Joe asked if any of this was true. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my entire life. I explained to him that I wanted to switch to the night shift in the first place, so I didn't have to be around Steve. He creeped me out. Their relationship was an emotional roller coaster that I did not want to be around. He agreed. He said that she would no longer be working at Arnold Schwarzenegger's Barbarian Pizza Shop. She was fired promptly the next day, and Steve quit a few days later. I never heard from them again.